Hello and welcome to 221B After Dark, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Tonight, fog coils through Victorian London like a tiger's breath. A blood-stained glove arrives at Sherlock Holmes' door, carried by a veiled lady whose guardian has vanished from Kensington Palace. A cursed emerald, a mechanical beast, and a list of the dead point to vengeance 40 years in the making. Pull your chair closer to the fire, dear listener. The game is afoot, the tiger walks, and justice waits in the shadows. Sip slowly. The tale is just beginning. Chapter 1. The Colonel's Shadow. It was a raw November evening in 1897, the sort that makes even the stoutest Londoner long for the fireside, when the bell of 221B Baker Street rang with a violence that seemed to rattle the very bones of the house. I had just settled into my armchair with a copy of The Lancet open to an article on the bactericidal properties of carbolic acid, the fire crackling merrily and a glass of Mrs. Hudson's excellent coffee at my elbow, when the sound shattered the quiet like a pistol shot. Mrs. Hudson appeared in the doorway, apron clutched in one hand, eyes wide. "There's a lady, doctor," veiled, trembling, insists on seeing Mr. Holmes at once. Says it's a matter of life and death. Holmes, who had been reclining upon the sofa in his mouse-colored dressing gown, violin tucked beneath his chin, lowered the bow with a languid grace that belied the sudden spark in his gray eyes. "Life and death, Mrs. Hudson? How delightfully unambiguous. Show her up." The landlady vanished, and I heard the rustle of silk upon the 17 steps, the hesitant tap of a woman's boot, the soft sob of breath held too long. When the door opened fully, the figure that entered seemed less a visitor than a specter conjured from the fog itself. She was tall, clad head to toe in mourning black, the veil so dense that only the glint of eyes, gunmetal gray rimmed with red, betrayed her humanity. In her gloved hands she clutched a small kid leather glove, stiff and dark with what could only be blood. "Dr. Watson." Her voice was low, cultured but threaded with a tremor that spoke of terror held in check by sheer will. "They told me at Scotland Yard that Mr. Sherlock Holmes receives even at this hour, and that you, sir, are his trusted companion." I rose at once, offering the basket chair opposite the fire. "Pray be seated, madam. You are quite safe here." Holmes had already swung his long legs to the floor, leaning forward with that air of eager attention which told me the game was afoot before a word more had been spoken. "Distress is the one caller I never turn away, madam. Remove your veil if you wish. The fire is warm, and anonymity is a poor shield against fear." For a moment she hesitated, fingers whitening on the blood-stained glove. Then, with a gesture that was half defiance, half exhaustion, she lifted the veil. The face revealed was younger than I had expected, perhaps 25, pale as ivory, with a mouth set in lines of determination and eyes that had seen too much. A faint scar, thin and silver, traced her left cheekbone like the track of a tear frozen in time. "My name is Violet de Merville," she said, the words falling into the quiet room like pebbles into a well. "Ward of Colonel Sebastian Moran, late of the 1st Bangalore Pioneers. 3 nights ago he vanished from his apartments in Kensington Palace after receiving this." From her reticule she drew a card, heavy cream stock, embossed with the royal cipher in gold, and laid it upon the occasional table between us. The message was scrawled across it in ink, the color of fresh arterial blood. "The tiger returns at moonrise. Bring the emerald eye or join the list." Holmes' lean fingers darted out, seizing the card with the precision of a heron striking at a fish. He held it to the gas lamp, tilting it so the light caught the embossing, then brought it to his nose and inhaled once, sharply. "Russian manufacture, watermarked 1895. The ink is cochineal mixed with ferrous sulfate, produces that vivid crimson but corrodes the nib. written in haste by a left-handed person whose pulse was racing. Note the tremor in the downstroke of the T. He flipped the card over. On the reverse, faint indentation showed where a heavier hand had pressed. Written on a blotter. See the reversed ghost of the message beneath. And here, he indicated a smear at the corner, a thumbprint in the same ink but diluted with perspiration. The writer was sweating profusely. Mr. Merville watched him with a mixture of awe and desperation. The glove is the Colonel's. I found it on the steps of the palace orangery at dawn yesterday, clutched in the jaws of the stone tiger that guards the entrance. The blood is fresh. Holmes' eyes narrowed to slits. Colonel Sebastian Moran, finest shot in the Indian Army, companion of big game hunters from the Caucasus to the Nile. Author of Heavy Game of the Western Himalayas and, unless I am mistaken, the anonymous marksman who dropped that rogue elephant at 50 paces in the Terai. And now resident in Kensington Palace? Curious. He took the glove from her unresisting fingers, turning it beneath the lamp. The kid leather was slashed diagonally across the back, 4 parallel cuts that had severed the seams and exposed the lining. Dark blood had soaked through, stiffening the material into a grotesque gauntlet. Human blood type O, still tacky at the edges, Holmes murmured, scraping a flake onto a glass slide with his penknife. The cuts are clean, made by a blade with 4 parallel edges, something like a Malay parang or... His voice dropped to a whisper. The claw of a Bengal tiger. Mr. Merville flinched as though struck. He kept a stuffed tiger in his study, a monster taken near Jhansi in '57. Its left eye was replaced last year with a flawless emerald the size of a pigeon's egg. The Maharaja swore the stone was cursed, that it carried the soul of a slain princess. When it vanished from his treasury during the mutiny, he placed a price upon the Colonel's head. I felt the old familiar thrill course through me, the sense that we stood upon the precipice of some dark and tangled drama. You believe the Maharaja's agents have come for vengeance after 40 years? Holmes sprang from his chair with that sudden restless energy which I knew heralded the hunt. Watson, the spirit case. Brandy for Mr. Merville, whiskey for myself. We leave for Kensington Palace within the hour. He whirled upon our client. The emerald eye. Describe it precisely. She closed her eyes, reciting as though from a fever dream. Octagonal cut, 37 carats, the color of new leaves in moonlight. A flaw at the heart shaped like a tiny dagger. The Colonel wore it in a signet ring, but of late kept it in the tiger's socket, saying the beast guarded it better than any safe. Holmes was already at the bookshelf, pulling down his indexed volume of regimental records. Moran, commissioned 1855, mentioned in dispatches at Delhi, awarded the Mutiny Medal with 2 clasps. Retired 1889 on half pay, appointed to the honorary colonelcy of the Royal East Middlesex Volunteers. Residence, Apartment 12, East Wing, Kensington Palace, by gracious permission of Her Majesty. He snapped the book shut. The game, Mr. Merville, is afoot, and the tiger is loose. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing, yellow and sulphurous from the Thames. Somewhere a church bell tolled 11, the sound muffled to a funeral note. I fetched my service revolver from the drawer, checking the cylinders by habit while Holmes shrugged into his ulster an ear-flap traveling cap. Mr. Merville rose, steadying herself against the mantel. There is more. The Colonel left a letter, addressed to me but sealed. I have not opened it. She produced a thick envelope from her reticule, the flap secured with black wax impressed by the Moran crest, a tiger's head cooped at the neck. Holmes weighed it in his palm. Posted from the palace at 6:17 p.m. 3 nights ago. Note the postmark. The ink on the seal is still slightly tacky. He used the same crimson mixture as the threatening card, curiouser and curiouser. He slit the envelope with his pocket knife. The single sheet within was covered in the colonel's bold, angular hand. My dear Violet, if this reaches you, I am already in the tiger's jaws. The emerald is the key. Deliver it to no one save Sherlock Holmes. Trust not the scarlet coat nor the voice that speaks with my tongue. The list grows shorter nightly. Burn this after reading. S.M. Holmes' face was a study in controlled excitement. Watson, call a four-wheeler. Lestrade will meet us at the palace gate. He owes me a favor after the Camberwell poisoning. Miss de Merville, you will accompany us. Your presence may draw the beast from cover. As we descended the stairs, the fog seemed to part before us like a curtain, revealing the gleam of wet cobblestones and the distant flicker of a handom's lamps. The driver, a grizzled veteran with a face like a walnut, touched his whip to his cap. Kensington Palace, Governor. Through this pea souper? It'll cost you. Holmes tossed him a sovereign. Double if you reach the orangery in under 20 minutes. The cab lurched forward, hooves striking sparks from the stones. Through the isinglass window I watched Miss de Merville's reflection, pale, composed, but with a pulse beating wildly at her throat. Holmes sat opposite, eyes closed, long fingers steepled beneath his chin, already deep in that trance of concentration which I knew better than to disturb. The street slid past in a blur of gas lamps and shadows. The shuttered shops of Oxford Street, the silent bulk of Hyde Park, the iron railings of Kensington Gardens where the trees loomed like hanged men in the mist. At last the cab rattled to a halt before the palace's eastern gate, where a knot of constables stood beneath a swinging lantern. Superintendent Lestrade detached himself from the group, his ferret face pinched with cold and worry. Holmes, about time. His Grace the Duke of Cambridge is in a rare taking. Can't have a scandal with the Queen's cousin in residence. Moran's room sealed since Tuesday. No body, no forced entry, only this. He led us along a gravel path to the orangery door. There, gouged into the oak as though by some monstrous hand, were 4 parallel slashes deep enough to splinter the wood. The marks began at a height of 6 feet and raked downward, ending in a spray of splinters that glittered with frost. Holmes dropped to one knee, magnifying glass gleaming. Panthera tigris, adult male, weight approximately 30 stone. The depth of penetration suggests a claw span of 4 inches. Yet the tiger has been dead these 15 years. He scraped a fragment into an envelope, ivory stained with verdigris. Someone has crafted artificial claws, and recently. Miss de Merville breath plumed white in the cold. The colonel's tiger stands in the entrance hall. Its left eye, the emerald, was pried out 2 nights ago. The socket was empty when I found the glove. Holmes straightened, eyes blazing. Then the hunt begins in earnest. Watson, the revolver. Lestrade, your whistle. The tiger walks tonight, and we shall meet it on its own ground. Above us the moon hung low and red, a baleful eye peering through the fog. Somewhere in the darkness a clock struck midnight, and the palace seemed to hold its breath. Chapter 2. The Palace at Midnight. The orangery door creaked open on well-oiled hinges, exhaling a breath of damp earth and hothouse roses. Lestrade's lantern threw a trembling circle of light across marble tiles veined like frost, and the beam caught the stuffed tiger at the far end of the hall. Crouched upon a pedestal of black walnut, glass eyes staring with eternal hunger. Its left socket gaped empty, a black pit where the emerald had once blazed. Holmes moved first, silent as a cat, his ulster brushing the fronds of a giant palm. I followed, revolver heavy in my coat pocket, Miss de Merville close behind, her mourning silk whispering like a conspirator. Lestrade brought up the rear, muttering about protocols and warrants. The tiger's pedestal was ringed with footprints, small, narrow, a woman's boot, superimposed by the heavier military tread I had noted earlier. Holmes knelt, measuring with his tape, size 4 and size 10 respectively. The smaller print is fresh, the larger 48 hours old. Note the drag mark. Something heavy was pulled across the floor. He indicated a faint groove in the dust, leading toward a side corridor. We tracked it past glass cases of orchids and ferns, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming cereus. The corridor opened into Colonel Moran's private study, a soldier's sanctum of maps, trophies, and the faint aroma of cheroot smoke. The stuffed tiger's mate, this one intact, crouched upon a mahogany desk, its remaining emerald eye winking like a malevolent star. Holmes' fingers danced across the blotter. The colonel sat here at 6:17 p.m. See the angle of the inkstand. He wrote the letter to Miss de Merville, sealed it then. He lifted a corner of the Persian rug, stood abruptly. The chair rolled back exactly 19 inches. Something startled him. On the desk lay a half-finished glass of whiskey, the surface filmed with a faint, oily sheen. Holmes sniffed, then touched a drop to his tongue. Laudanum, enough to fell an ox. He never drank it. He pointed to a faint ring on the blotter where another glass had stood. 2 visitors. One drugged the whiskey, the other distracted him. Lestrade snorted, or he took a nip and wandered off in a stupor. Holmes ignored him, already at the French windows that opened onto the terrace. The lock was intact, but the sill bore fresh scratches. 4 parallel lines, identical to those on the orangery door. The tiger entered here. But how did it leave? He stepped outside, lantern raised. The terrace overlooked the round pond, its surface a pewter mirror under the moon. Pug marks, massive, splayed, led from the window to the gravel path, then vanished. Holmes scraped at the edge of one print. Plaster of Paris mixed with sand to hold the shape. The beast was carried. He pointed to scuffs in the gravel. Boot prints again, size 10, but now paired with smaller prints, size 4, walking backward. Someone dragged a weighted sack, the emerald perhaps. Miss de Merville's voice was a thread. The colonel's medals, his Victoria Cross, the mutiny medal, they're gone from the case. The wall safe stood open, its combination dial spun to random numbers. Inside, empty velvet cushions shaped for decorations, and a single brass button engraved with the Prince of Wales' feathers. Holmes pocketed it without comment. Lestrade's whistle shrilled suddenly. "Here, Mr. Holmes, in the fireplace." Ashes, still warm, held the fragments of a photograph. Holmes teased them, out with tongs. A sepia image of Moran in full dress uniform, arm around a dark-haired woman in scarlet. The woman's face had been scratched out with savage force. Only a corner remained, showing a gloved hand holding a tiger's paw brooch. "Scarlet," Holmes murmured. The colonel's warning. Trust not the scarlet coat. The 11th Hussars wore scarlet, but the regiment disbanded in 71. Someone revives old colors. We moved to the bedroom. The bed was undisturbed, but the wardrobe door hung ajar. Inside, a dress uniform, scarlet tunic, gold braid, had been slashed from collar to hem, the cuts mirroring the claw marks on the door. A scrap of paper was pinned to the breast with a tiger's claw. The list grows shorter. Holmes' eyes gleamed. The killer taunts us. Watson, the revolver. Loaded? I nodded. Good. Lestrade, seal the palace. No one enters or leaves until dawn. As we stepped back into the corridor, a clock chimed one. Somewhere in the fog, a low growl echoed, not animal but human, muffled by distance and malice. Miss de Merville clutched my arm. "The tiger walks," she whispered. Holmes' smile was thin as a scalpel. "Then let us follow its tracks, before the next name is crossed from the list." Chapter 3. The ciphered invitation. Dawn found us back in Baker Street, the fog thinning to a dirty gray veil as the city's chimneys began their daily belch of soot. Mrs. Hudson had laid a breakfast of deviled kidneys, eggs, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Holmes ignored it, pacing the turkey carpet like a caged leopard, the crimson card and Moran's letter spread before him on the table. I buttered toast and watched him work. He had already covered 3 sheets of foolscap with symbols, crossing out, rewriting, muttering in that low, rapid monotone that told me his mind was racing far ahead of his tongue. Visionnaire, he announced at last, flinging down the pencil. Keyword Jauncey, the siege where Moran earned his clasp. Decrypts 2, the list is the key. Blood pays blood. He tossed me the Times, folded to page 7. Obituary column, Watson. Read the names aloud. I scanned the closely printed lines. Captain Reginald Hargreave, late 1st Bangalore Pioneers, found drowned in the Serpentine, aged 62. Major Arthur Blaine, apoplexy at his club in St. James's. Lieutenant Percy Folliot, mauled by escaped tiger, Regent's Park Zoo. Holmes' hand slashed the air. Everyone served with Moran in 57, all dead within the month. The list grows shorter indeed. He seized the globe, spinning it until India faced us. The Maharaja's vengeance, delayed 40 years. But why now? And why spare Moran until the emerald resurfaces? Mr. Merville, who had passed the night in Mrs. Hudson's spare room, entered pale but composed, her mourning dress exchanged for a severe navy walking costume. The colonel kept a second list, she said, producing a folded sheet from her reticule. Names in his own hand, crossed through in red. The same men. Holmes unfolded it beside the newspaper. The names matched exactly. The final entry, Moran's own, was underlined thrice, the ink still wet. He knew, Holmes said softly. Staged his disappearance to draw the killer. The blood on the glove, his own, from a lancet. Classic misdirection. He turned to the crimson card again, holding it to the window. Watermark. Russian, as I thought. But the paper is English, sold only by Ryman's in the Strand. The ink, cochineal and iron, used by theatrical suppliers for fake blood. Our tiger is a stage beast. Lestrade burst in without knocking, hat dripping. Palace is sealed, Mr. Holmes. Found this in the gardener's shed. He slapped a scarlet dolman jacket onto the table. 11th Hussars, gold frogging torn, the left sleeve slashed and stained with what looked like stage paint. A brass button was missing. Holmes pounced. The mate to the one in the safe. Note the thread, scarlet silk, military issue, but the buttonhole is hand-stitched, recent work. A woman's touch. He sniffed the fabric. Valerian and musk, catnip for tigers, real or stuffed. I remembered the growl in the fog. The beast is mechanical, partially. The claws are steel, the fur dyed cotton, the growl, a phonograph cylinder. But the operator is flesh and blood. Holmes' eyes gleamed. Tonight, the round pond. The message said moonrise. We shall be there. He spent the afternoon in a fever of preparation, wiring Calcutta for regimental rolls, sending Billy the page boy to Ryman's for paper samples, brewing reagents in test tubes that filled the room with acrid fumes. By 4 o'clock, he had the dolman spread beneath the microscope. Cat hair, dyed, and here, he lifted a strand with tweezers, human hair, dark, coiled, treated with henna. A woman of mixed Indian and European blood, perhaps. Mr. Merville started. The colonel's fiancée, Miss Amelia Winter. She visited the palace last week, wore scarlet to tease him about his old regiment. Holmes' smile was wolfish. Scarlet coat, access to the apartments, knowledge of the emerald. But motive? He turned to the bookshelves, pulling down his indexed volume MZ. Winter, illegitimate daughter of the Maharaja's jeweler, educated in England. Returned to claim the stone. Moran refused to surrender it. Blood pays blood. The clock struck 5. Outside, the fog was rolling in again, thicker than before, swallowing the gas lamps one by one. Holmes shrugged into his ulster. Watson, the revolver and the dark lantern. Mr. Merville, you will remain here. Your safety is paramount. Lestrade, your whistle and 2 constables. We meet at the Kensington Gardens gate at 11. As we stepped into the street, the hansom's lamps were mere halos in the murk. The driver cursed as the horse shied at shadows. Holmes leaned close. The tiger will come to the pond for the emerald. We shall give it what it wants, and take the hunter instead. The cab lurched forward, hooves muffled by the fog. Somewhere in the distance a church bell tolled the hour, and I fancied I heard beneath its brazen note the low mechanical growl of a beast that had never lived. Chapter 4. The Missing Medals. The Imperial War Museum on Lambeth Road wore the gray hush of a mausoleum at 9:30 that morning. Fog still clung to the river, and the great bronze doors creaked open only after Holmes slipped the porter a half-crown and the magic words, "Official police business." Inside, the air smelled of camphor, dust, and old gun oil. Glass cases marched in solemn ranks, each cradling a fragment of empire. Tattered colors, blood-stained saber taches, medals that had once flashed on sun-baked parade grounds. We were led to the Indian Mutiny Gallery by a curator whose mutton-chop whiskers trembled with indignation. Colonel Moran's decorations were on loan for the Jubilee exhibition, he sniffed. Returned 6 months ago. The Victoria Cross, Mutiny Medal with Delhi and Lucknow clasps, the Order of the Star of India, priceless. Yet pawned, Holmes said quietly, producing a photograph Lestrade had wired from the yard. Moran's medals laid upon green baize, ticket number 1873. Redeemed 3 days before the disappearance by a woman in scarlet. You keep visitors' signatures? The register was produced. On the date in question, a single entry in violet ink. A. Winter, 14 Palace Gardens, W. The handwriting matched the diary fragment we had glimpsed in the palace, Miss Amelia Winter. Holmes' eyes glittered. The fiancé, Watson the cab. Our next stop was a narrow shop in Whitechapel, its window crowded with regimental badges and tarnished epaulets. The pawnbroker, a wizened Pathan named Khan, greeted us with the wariness of a man who had seen too many police boots. Holmes laid the photograph on the counter. 3 days ago, Khan said, adjusting his spectacles. Woman in red cloak, veil thick as winter fog. Paid in crisp Bank of England fivers, still smelled of the mint. Said the medals were her father's, taken in error. He opened a drawer and produced the ticket stub. Kept this for the receipt. Unusual, most don't care. Holmes examined the stub, ink, cochineal again, and the notes, sequential numbers, traceable. He turned to me. The Bank of England opens at 10. We have time. At the bank, a nervous clerk confirmed the notes had been drawn the previous week by the account of Captain James Selby, 1st Lifeguards, care of the Army and Navy Club. Selby, scarlet tunic, access to the palace, motive of jealousy if Miss Winter was promised to Moran. Holmes' fingers drummed the marble counter. Selby and Winter, partners or rivals. The medals are bait, the emerald the prize. Back in Baker Street by noon, Holmes spread the evidence like a hand of cards. The pawn ticket, the banknote serials, the brass button from the safe, the scarlet dolman sleeve. He had Billy fetch the army list and the court circular. Selby, commissioned 1885, mentioned in dispatches Zulu border 1888. Debts at Tattersall's $1 in $400. Moran co-signed a bill for $800 last Michaelmas, now overdue. He tapped the page. The colonel was selling medals to cover Selby's losses. Miss Winter discovered the theft of the emerald. Together they staged the haunting to force Moran to the pond, where Selby would retrieve the stone. I poured coffee, but the claw marks, too high for a man. Stilts, Holmes said. Gardner mentioned a tall figure near the orangery. Selby is 6'2", on stilts, 7 feet. The tiger costume hides the poles. He wired the palace. Search Selby's quarters for stilts, plaster, steel claws. Then he turned to the globe again, spinning it to the Punjab. The Maharaja died in '89. His jeweler's daughter, Amelia Winter, inherits the claim. She wants the stone returned with honor. Selby wants it sold. Moran refused both. The reply came within the hour. Stilts found in Selby's coal cellar, plaster residue on boots, steel claws in locker. Selby absent since yesterday. Holmes sprang up. The net closes. Tonight the pond. Selby will come for the emerald, Miss Winter for justice. We shall give them both. Chapter 5. The Gardener's Secret. The fog had lifted by the time we returned to Kensington Palace, but the sky hung low and sullen, the color of wet slate. It was just past 2 in the afternoon, yet the gardens felt hushed, as though the very leaves held their breath. Lestrade met us at the tradesman's gate with 2 burly constables and the air of a man who had slept little and liked it less. Selby's quarters turned up the stilts, plaster and claws right enough, he said, jerking a thumb toward the east wing. But the birds flown. Captain left at dawn yesterday. Said he was called to Windsor on urgent duty, no sign of the woman in scarlet. Holmes' eyes narrowed to slits. Then we hunt the hunter. Watson, the revolver. Lestrade, your men to the boundaries. Miss de Merville. He turned to our client, who had insisted on accompanying us despite my protests. You will remain with Mrs. Hudson at Baker Street. This is no place for a gentlewoman. She lifted her chin, the scar on her cheek catching the pale light. The Colonel is my guardian, Mr. Holmes. I will see this through. Holmes studied her for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. Very well, but you will obey my instructions to the letter. We set off along the gravel paths that wound through the palace gardens. Lawns clipped to billiard table smoothness, yew hedges sculpted into fantastical beasts, flower beds where late chrysanthemums glowed like embers against the gloom. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, and somewhere a peacock screamed, the sound thin and mournful. Our destination was the head gardener's bothy, a low stone building half hidden behind a screen of laurels. The door stood ajar, and from within came the rhythmic snip-snip of shears. We found the gardener, an elderly Scotsman with a face like a withered apple and a deer-stalker hat that might have been borrowed from Holmes himself, trimming a miniature boxwood topiary into the shape of a charging boar. "MacDonald," Lestrade barked, "these gentlemen have questions." The old man straightened slowly, joints creaking. "Aye, I've nae doubt. Seen more comings and goings these 3 days than in a 12-month of royal garden parties." He wiped his hands on a sackcloth apron and fixed Holmes with a shrewd blue eye. "Ye'll be wanting the tall figure in scarlet, I wager." Holmes' smile was thin. "You are observant, Mr. MacDonald. Pray describe what you saw." The gardener leaned his shears against the wall and led us around the bothy to a patch of freshly turned earth beneath a copper beech. Night before last, near 11. Moon was up, but the mist made ghosts of everything. I was locking the glass house when I heard a rustle. Thought it was foxes after the grapes. Then I saw her. "Her?" I echoed. "Aye, a woman tall as a grenadier, cloaked in scarlet from throat to ankle. Carried a wicker basket covered with oilcloth, walked backward along the path, sweeping her tracks with a besom broom. Clever, but not clever enough." He pointed to the flower bed. "See the crushed petals? Lavender and valerian. She'd been in the herb garden. Cats go mad for valerian, and tigers are but great cats." Holmes dropped to one knee, parting the leaves with delicate fingers. The soil bore the imprint of a narrow boot, size 4, the same as in the orangery. But beside it was a deeper mark, a circular depression 3 inches across, as though a pole had been driven into the earth. "Stilts," Holmes murmured. "She planted one here to pivot. Note the angle. She was looking back toward the orangery. The basket was heavy. The handle left a bruise in the soil. He scraped a sample into an envelope. Plaster residue again. Selby's work, but the woman's tread. MacDonald led us next to the glass house, a soaring cathedral of iron and glass, its panes misted with condensation. Inside, the air was tropically warm, thick with the scent of oranges and night-blooming jasmine. Rows of lemon trees in terracotta pots marched toward a central fountain where a bronze Neptune spewed water into a lily pool. Here, the gardener said, pointing to a workbench beneath a shattered pane. Found this at dawn yesterday. He produced a scrap of scarlet cloth caught on a nail, torn from the dolman, the gold frogging unraveled like spilled entrails. Beside it lay a single brass button, identical to the one from Moran's safe, engraved with the Prince of Wales' feathers. Holmes' eyes blazed, royal household livery. But the thread is silk, hand-stitched, recent work. Someone altered the uniform. He lifted the cloth to his nose, Valerian again, and something else, camphor. The tiger costume was stored here. We searched the glass house systematically. Behind a screen of banana plants, we found a wicker basket, its oilcloth cover askew. Inside, a collapsed framework of bamboo and wire, fur, dyed cotton, tawny with black stripes, folded neatly, and a leather harness fitted with steel claws. The claws were hinged, operated by cords that ran through brass eyelets to a trigger at the wrist. Mechanical, I breathed. But the height, Holmes pointed to the ceiling. Iron hooks normally used for hanging baskets had been bent downward. She hung the costume here to work on it. The stilts were strapped to the legs. See the leather cuffs. When extended, the operator stood 7 feet tall. The growl, he indicated a small brass horn tucked into the basket. A child's toy, but with a phonograph cylinder inside. Clever. MacDonald scratched his head. But why the palace gardens? Why not spirit the beast away? Because the emerald is the bait, Holmes said. They needed Moran to bring it to the round pond. The haunting was to drive him there in terror. But something went wrong. We emerged from the glass house to find Lestrade waiting with a discovery of his own. A patch of ground near the orangery where the grass had been trampled flat in a perfect circle 10 feet across. At the center, a single tiger's paw print, plaster again, pointed toward the pond. The stage, Holmes said. They rehearsed the attack here. Note the scorch marks, gunpowder flash to simulate the tiger's roar. Amateurs, but determined. Miss de Merville had been silent throughout, but now she spoke, her voice steady. The colonel kept a diary in his study. I saw it once, locked with a swan neck clasp. If there is proof, Holmes cut her off. The Duchess of Tech's apartments. She is the colonel's confidant. Watson, the revolver. We pay a call. The Duchess received us in her private parlor, a bower of lavender silk and gilt furniture. She was a plump, kindly woman in her 60s, her white hair dressed high, a pug dog snoring in her lap. Her eyes widened at sight of Holmes. Mr. Holmes, Sebastian spoke of you often. He said if ever he were in trouble, you were the man. She rang for tea, then produced a small leather-bound diary from a lacquered cabinet. He left this with me 2 days before he vanished. Said to give it to no one but you. The clasp yielded to Holmes' picklock with a soft click. The pages were filled with the colonel's angular hand, the final entries in crimson ink. 10th Nov, A.W. demands the stone, says it is her birthright, refused. J.S. threatens exposure of debts. 11th Nov, heard the tiger in the corridor, claws on wood, cannot sleep. 12th Nov, will stage disappearance, blood from lancet, emerald in tiger's eye, trust Holmes. The last page held a crude map, the round pond, an X marked at the northern edge, beneath it a single line. The list ends with me. Holmes closed the diary. Your Grace, has Captain Selby visited recently? The Duchess flushed. James is my nephew by marriage. He came yesterday, agitated, asking after Sebastian's will. Said there was a codicil leaving everything to Miss Winter. I told him I knew nothing of it. Holmes rose. We have our players. Selby wants the fortune. Miss Winter the stone's return. Moran planned to trap them both. Tonight, the pond. As we left the parlor, the palace clock struck 4. The gardens were sinking into twilight, the yew-beasts casting long shadows like sentinels. MacDonald met us at the gate with a final offering. A single tiger's whisker, dyed cotton but stiff with dried blood. Found it caught in the orangery door, he said. Human blood, I'd wager. The colonel fought back. Holmes tucked the whisker into his waistcoat. Then he is alive. The game is not yet over. Chapter 6. The Duchess's Diary. The Duchess of Tech's private parlor smelled of lavender water, beeswax, and the faint musk of the pug dog that snored upon a velvet cushion. A coal fire hissed in the grate. Outside, the palace gardens lay drowned in violet dusk, the last light bleeding from the sky like a wound. Her Grace sat upon a gilt chaise longue, hands folded over a small Morocco-bound diary the color of dried violets. She had summoned us back within the hour, her note delivered by a footman whose livery buttons matched the one in Homa's pocket. Sebastian left this with me yesterday morning, she said, voice trembling between loyalty and fear. He was agitated, said if anything happened to him, Mr. Holmes must have it at once. I locked it in my jewel safe, but I cannot sleep for wondering. Holmes took the diary with the reverence of a priest receiving a relic. The swan neck clasp was already sprung, his own picklock, no doubt, employed during our earlier visit. He turned the pages beneath the rose-shaded lamp, his face a study in controlled excitement. Miss de Merville stood behind him, one hand on the back of his chair. Lestrade hovered by the door, hat in hand. I kept watch at the window, revolver ready, though the fog outside was now so thick that the nearest gas lamp was only a sickly halo. The entries were brief, soldierly, yet each word carried the weight of a man staring into an abyss. A.W. came at dusk. Scarlet cloak, eyes like black ice, demanded the emerald, said the Maharaja's blood cried out. Refused. J.S. waiting in the corridor, scarlet tunic, debts heavier than his saber, told them both to leave, locked the stone in the tiger's eye, heard claws in the night, scratched my own arm with lancet, blood on glove to stage attack, must draw them to the pond. The list is nearly complete. J.S. forged my hand, letter to Miss V promising the stone to A.W. if she will marry him. Intercepted it. Burned the forgery, he grows desperate. They rehearse in the glass house. Stilts, wires, plaster paws. The tiger will walk at moonrise. I will be the bait. The final entry, dated the day of the disappearance, was scrawled in crimson ink, the nib tearing the paper. If I fail, tell Violet the emerald is paste. The real stone is sewn into the tiger's remaining eye. Trust Holmes. God forgive me the lies. Holmes closed the diary with a soft snap. The colonel is alive, he said quietly, and cleverer than his enemies. The blood, the glove, the slashed uniform, all theater. He staged his own abduction to force their hand. The Duchess dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Sebastian was courting my companion, Miss Amelia Winter. I thought it a May-December fancy, but James, Captain Selby, forbade it, said Moran's debts would taint the family. Then Amelia began receiving anonymous letters, threats in Sanskrit, tiger claws drawn in blood. Holmes' fingers drummed the diary cover. Selby's motive is greed, Miss Winter's ancestral honor. Together they plan to terrify Moran into surrendering the stone, then silence him forever. But Moran turned the trap upon them. He reopened the diary to a pressed flower, jasmine, bruised and brown, from the glass house. Miss Winter's scent. She was here yesterday. The Duchess flushed. She came to take tea, said she was leaving for India, her passage booked on the P&O Malabar. But her eyes were red as though she had wept all night. Holmes sprang to his feet. Watson, the revolver. Lestrade, seal the docks. Every ship to Bombay. Mr. Merville, you will accompany us to the armory. The tiger's eye must be examined. We descended through the palace's labyrinth, marble corridors where portraits of long-dead courtiers stared down with painted disdain, servants scurrying like mice before the royal storm. The armory lay in the east wing, a vaulted chamber lined with racks of Enfields, sabers, and lances that gleamed like frost in the lantern light. The stuffed tiger stood upon a pedestal at the far end, its remaining emerald eye catching the flame and throwing it back in a green blaze. Holmes approached it as one might a living beast. The socket was deep, lined with black velvet. He inserted a probe. Nothing. Then, with infinite care, he pressed the tiger's glass eye. A soft click, and the entire orb swung outward on a hidden hinge, revealing a cavity within the skull. Inside lay a small oilskin packet. He unwrapped it beneath the lantern. A stone the size of a pigeon's egg, octagonal, flawless, except for the tiny dagger-shaped flaw at its heart, the emerald. Paste in the socket, real stone hidden here, he murmured. Moran knew they would search the obvious place. But where is the colonel himself? Lestrade's whistle shrilled from the corridor. Mr. Holmes, you'll want to see this. We followed him to a small antechamber adjoining the armory. The door had been forced, the lock splintered. Inside, Colonel Moran sat bound to a chair with picture cord, gag in mouth, eyes blazing above a livid bruise on his temple. At his feet lay the duplicate emerald, green glass, expertly cut. The real stone was safe in Holmes' pocket. I cut the bonds while Holmes removed the gag. Moran's voice was hoarse but steady. Took you long enough, Holmes. They jumped me in the fog. Selby with a sandbag, the woman with chloroform. Planned to drown me in the pond at moonrise, retrieve the stone from the tiger's corpse. And the list? Holmes asked. Moran's laugh was bitter. My own creation. I wrote the obituaries myself, paid a clerk at the Times to insert them. Wanted Selby and Winter to believe the Maharaja's curse was real. Thought it would frighten them into revealing themselves. Instead, they turned it into a weapon. He rubbed his wrists, revealing the lancet cut on his palm, source of the blood on the glove. Staged the claw marks with a garden rake. The growl was a phonograph cylinder I recorded in the glass house, but they were one step ahead. Holmes helped him to his feet. And Miss Winter's claim? True enough. Her mother was the Maharaja's jeweler's daughter. Seduced by a British officer, cast out. The emerald was her dowry. I took it in '57 to save my men from court-martial for looting. Thought 40 years would bury the sin. His eyes met Mr. Merville's. Forgive me, child. I meant to return it anonymously. The Duchess entered, supported by a footman, and pressed the diary into Moran's hands. Your confession, Sebastian. Let it end here. But Holmes was already at the window, peering into the fog. It ends at the Round Pond. They will come for the stone tonight, Selby for the fortune, Winter for justice. We have the bait. He turned to Lestrade. Your men to the boathouse. Watson, the dark lantern. Colonel, you will play the corpse, one last performance. Moran's grin was wolfish, with pleasure. As we prepared to leave, Mr. Merville touched Holmes' sleeve, and if they do not come. Holmes' smile was cold as the fog. Then the tiger hunts them. Chapter 7. The fog on the Round Pond. The fog that night was a living creature, thick, yellow, and venomous, rolling in from the Thames in slow, deliberate waves. It swallowed the palace, the gardens, the very stars, until Kensington seemed adrift in a sea of curdled milk. Gas lamps along the broad walk guttered like dying candles. The iron railings dripped with moisture. Every footstep sounded muffled, as though the world itself were gagged. We took up our positions at 11:30. Lestrade and 4 constables crouched in the boathouse, whistles ready. Colonel Moran, bandaged, bruised, but grimly eager, lay upon a ground sheet at the northern edge of the round pond, the paste emerald glinting on his breast like a false heart. Mr. Merville, cloaked in black, knelt beside him, a mourning figure carved from shadow. I stood 10 paces behind, revolver in hand, dark lantern shuttered. Holmes had vanished into the mist 20 minutes earlier, promising to circle the pond from the east. The water lay flat and black, a mirror without reflection. Reeds rustled, though there was no wind. Somewhere a night bird called once, then fell silent. The palace clock struck 12. 12 slow, deliberate notes that seemed to come from the bottom of a well. Then faintly at first, the sound we had waited for. The creak of oars in rowlocks, the soft slap of water against wood. A punt emerged from the fog like a ghost ship, poling silently toward the center of the pond. 2 figures stood in it, one tall, cloaked in scarlet, the other shorter, veiled in black. The scarlet figure raised a lantern. Its beam cut a tunnel through the murk and fell upon Moran's supine form. Sebastian. The voice was a woman's, low, musical, threaded with grief and triumph. Miss Amelia Winter. The tiger has brought you to judgment. The punt grounded with a soft crunch on the gravel margin. Miss Winter stepped ashore first, the scarlet cloak swirling about her like spilled blood. In her right hand she carried a small Indian dagger, curved, wicked, its hilt wrapped in gold wire. Behind her, Captain James Selby followed, his lifeguard's tunic unbuttoned, a Webley revolver glinting at his belt. His face was pale, eyes fever-bright. "Careful, Amelia," he muttered. "The old devil may still have fight in him." Miss Winter ignored him. She advanced upon Moran's body, lantern raised. The light fell upon the paste emerald and her breath caught. At last she whispered, "The eye of the princess returns to her people." She knelt, reaching for the stone. Moran's hand shot up like a striking cobra, seizing her wrist. "Not quite, my dear," Miss Winter screamed. Selby's revolver barked once, twice, muzzle flashes stabbing the fog. I fired in answer, the report rolling like thunder across the water. Moran rolled aside, snatching the dagger from Miss Winter's grip. Selby cursed and lunged, but the fog betrayed him. His boot slipped on wet gravel and he sprawled full length. Holmes' voice cut through the chaos, calm as a surgeon's. "Drop the weapon, Captain. The pond is surrounded." Selby scrambled to his knees, revolver swinging wildly. "Stay back. The stone is mine. Debts, damn you." A low growl rumbled from the reeds. Mechanical yet chilling, the stuffed tiger, animated by wires and stilts, rose from the mist like a nightmare given form. Its steel claws gleamed, its remaining eye, the true emerald, blazed with infernal light. Miss Winter had triggered the device from a cord at her waist. Now it lurched toward Moran, jaws agape. I fired again, shattering the lantern. Darkness swallowed us. There was a splash, a grunt, the crack of wood on bone. When I relit the dark lantern, the scene had frozen into a tableau. Moran pinning Selby face down in the mud, Holmes binding Miss Winter's wrists with his own scarf, Lestrade's constables emerging from the boathouse like avenging shades. The mechanical tiger lay on its side, wires twitching, the emerald eye dark. Holmes knelt beside it, prying open the skull cavity. "Clever," he murmured. "A clockwork heart, phonograph cylinder for the roar, stilts operated by knee levers." But the operator, he indicated Miss Winter, overreached. Selby spat mud. "She promised me half the stone's value, 120,000, enough to pay Tattersalls and buy a ranch in Argentina. Miss Winter's eyes blazed. Fool! The emerald is sacred. I would have melted it down and scattered the dust in the Ganges. Moran rose, brushing gravel from his coat, and I would have returned it anonymously with interest. But you forced my hand. Lestrade snapped handcuffs on the prisoners. Conspiracy to murder, Captain. And you, miss. Accessory before and after. The yard will sort the rest. As the constables led them away, Miss de Merville approached Moran. Guardian, she said softly, it is over. He took her hands. Thanks to Holmes, and to you, child, for trusting him. Holmes stood at the pond's edge, the true emerald cupped in his palm. The fog was lifting, a sliver of moon silvered the water. A pretty problem, he said, greed, vengeance, and a stone that has outlived empires. Watson, the diary. I produced the Duchess's volume. Holmes tore out the final page, the map of the pond, and folded it around the emerald. This returns to the Maharaja's heirs with Colonel Moran's apologies. The paste stone goes to the yard as evidence. And the tiger, he glanced at the broken automaton, belongs in a museum. Moran chuckled, preferably one with strong locks. We walked back through the gardens, the gravel crunching beneath our boots. The palace windows glowed like watchful eyes. Somewhere a nightingale began to sing, as though the fog had never been. Chapter 8. The Locked Armory. The palace clock had just chimed 1 when we re-entered the east wing, the fog at our heels like a vanquished beast. Lestrade's constables marched Selby and Miss Winter ahead of us, their footsteps echoing down the marble corridor in a rhythm of defeat. The captain's scarlet tunic was torn and muddied. Miss Winter's veil had slipped, revealing a face carved with exhaustion and defiance. Moran walked free, arm in a sling fashioned from Holmes' scarf, the bruise on his temple livid in the gaslight. Miss de Merville supported him, her mourning dress streaked with pond water, yet her eyes shone with a fierce pride. Holmes led the way to the armory, his stride purposeful. One loose thread remains, he said. The duplicate emerald, paste, yes, but expertly cut. Moran hid the true stone in the tiger's skull, but where did the false one come from? And why lock the armory door from within? The heavy oak door stood ajar now, the splintered lock dangling like a broken jaw. Inside the chamber was as we had left it, racks of Enfields gleaming, sabers crossed in silent salute, the stuffed tiger's pedestal empty save for a faint ring of dust where the automaton had stood. But something was different. A single candle guttered on a deal table, its flame trembling in a draught that should not exist. Beside it lay a sheet of foolscap, weighted by the paste emerald. Holmes snatched the paper. The message was scrawled in the same crimson ink. You have the stone, but not the secret. The tiger guards more than emeralds. Look to the locked room. Beneath the words, a crude sketch. The armory floor plan, an X marked in the northwest corner. Lestrade snorted. Another of the colonel's tricks? Moran shook his head. I wrote no such note. My confession is in the diary. Holmes was already on his knees, tapping the flagstones with the handle of his penknife. The third stone from the wall sounded hollow. He pried it up with the blade, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside, a small iron key black with age and a folded scrap of vellum. The vellum was a map, inked in faded sepia. The palace foundations, a dotted line leading from the armory to a chamber labeled magazine. A date, 1857, and the initials SM. My doing, Moran said quietly. During the mutiny, I smuggled the emerald out of Jauncey in a cartridge box. When I took up residence here, I hid the box in the old powder magazine beneath the palace. The key opens the iron door. I meant to retrieve it when the time was right. Holmes weighed the key in his palm, but someone else found the map. Selby? Miss Winter? Selby laughed, a bitter bark. I searched every inch of Moran's rooms, found nothing but debts. Miss Winter's eyes flashed. The magazine is sacred ground. British soldiers died there defending the palace in 57. I would not defile it. Holmes' gaze swept the armory, then the note is a lure. Someone wants us in the magazine tonight. He lit the dark lantern and led us down a narrow stair behind the saber racks, stone steps worn concave by generations of boots. The air grew colder, damper, carrying the scent of earth and rust. At the bottom, an iron door, green with verdigris, barred our path. The key turned with a groan and the door swung inward on screaming hinges. The magazine was a vaulted chamber, its walls lined with empty racks where kegs of powder had once stood. A single oil lamp hung from a chain, casting long shadows that danced like specters. In the center stood a wooden crate, lid pried open, straw spilling like entrails. Atop the straw lay a leather dispatch case, the Moran crest embossed in gold. Moran's face paled. My campaign chest. I thought it lost in the retreat from Lucknow. Holmes opened the case. Inside, a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, a miniature portrait of a dark-eyed Indian woman, and a small velvet pouch. He tipped the pouch into his hand. A second emerald, smaller but identical in cut and flaw to the one in his pocket. The mate, Moran breathed. I took both eyes from the tiger idol. One to bribe my way out of Jhansi, one to remember her by. He touched the portrait, the princess. She died in my arms. Miss Winter's voice was a whisper. My grandmother. Holmes closed the case. The secret the tiger guarded. But who left the note? A soft click answered him, the sound of a revolver being cocked. From the shadows behind the crate stepped a figure in palace livery, brass buttons gleaming. The footman who had delivered the Duchess's note, in his hand, a service Webley. "Drop the lantern, Mr. Holmes," he said, voice cultured, almost amused. And the stone, both of them. Lestrade's whistle shrilled, but the man was ready. He fired once. The bullet ricocheted off the lamp chain, plunging us into darkness. Chaos erupted. Shouts, the crash of bodies, the scrape of steel on stone. I fired blindly, the muzzle flash illuminating a tableau, the footman grappling with Moran, Miss Winter screaming, Holmes' silhouette leaping the crate. Then light. Holmes had relit the dark lantern. The footman lay sprawled, Moran's knee on his chest, the Webley skittering across the floor. Lestrade snapped handcuffs on the man's wrists. "Name?" Holmes demanded. The footman spat blood. "A Hawkins, late sergeant, 1st Bangalore Pioneers." "On the list." Moran's eyes widened. "You died at Delhi. I saw the grave." "Grave was empty," Hawkins sneered. "Deserted after the looting. Moran took the emeralds. I took the blame. Been waiting 40 years. Holmes picked up the fallen revolver. "You forged the note, left the map. Planned to take the stones and vanish." Hawkins laughed. "Worth a king's ransom. Enough to buy a new life in Brazil." Mr. Merville's voice cut through the gloom. "And the claw marks? The tiger?" "Selby's toy," Hawkins said. "I watched from the servants' corridors. When you took the bait at the pond, I slipped in to search the magazine. But the old fox was ahead of me." Moran helped Hawkins to his feet. "You could have asked, man. I'd have given you your share." Hawkins' eyes were bitter. "Honor, Colonel. You stole mine." Holmes pocketed the second emerald. "Honor is a luxury deserters cannot afford. Lestrade, the yard will want this one too." As we ascended the stairs, the magazine door clanged shut behind us, the key turned by Lestrade's hand. The armory felt almost cheerful by comparison, the candle still burning on the table. Holmes placed both emeralds side by side, the true and the memory. "Watson," he said, "the Duchess's diary mentioned a codicil." "Moran, your will?" Moran produced a sealed envelope from his coat. "Leaves everything to Miss Winter. on condition the emeralds are returned to Jauncey with a plaque bearing the princess's name. Miss Winter took the envelope, tears glistening. I will see it done. Selby, still cuffed, glared, and my debts. Holmes' smile was thin. The yard will garnish your army pension, a slow death but fitting. We left the armory as dawn crept through the high windows, painting the sabers rose and gold. The fog had lifted entirely. The gardens lay fresh and innocent, as though no tiger had ever walked there. Chapter 9. The Colonel's Confession. The palace's small audience chamber had been transformed into an impromptu court of inquiry. Dawn light filtered through tall windows, gilding the dust motes that drifted like slow snow. A long mahogany table had been dragged in from the steward's room. At its head sat Superintendent Lestrade, official notebook open, pencil poised. To his right, Colonel Moran, bandages fresh, uniform coat borrowed from the Duke's wardrobe, sat erect as though on parade. Captain Selby and Miss Amelia Winter occupied straight-backed chairs, wrists in steel, guarded by two constables whose faces betrayed nothing. Hawkins, the false footman, slumped in a corner, a third constable's hand heavy on his shoulder. Holmes leaned against a marble pillar, arms folded, the two emeralds in a velvet pouch at his belt. I stood behind Moran, revolver holstered but ready, Miss de Merville at my side, her hand resting lightly on the colonel's arm. Lestrade cleared his throat. Colonel Sebastian Moran, you are not under arrest yet, but the yard requires a full accounting. Begin with the night of the 12th. Moran's voice, when it came, was steady, the clipped cadence of a man who had faced courts-martial and lived. Very well. I'll give you the truth unvarnished. He leaned forward, fingers interlaced. It began 6 months ago. My debts, old gambling losses, a mortgage on the regimental plate, had mounted beyond recall. Selby, my godson, came to me with a scheme, sell the emerald to a Bombay dealer for 20,000. I refused. The stone was cursed, yes, but more than that, it was a debt of blood. In '57, during the sack of Jauncey, I took both eyes from the temple tiger, one to bribe the political officer, one to keep as a reminder of the woman I failed to save. His gaze flicked to Miss Winter. Your grandmother, miss. She died shielding me from a sepoy's bayonet. Miss Winter's lips parted, but no sound came. Selby sneered. Pretty sentiment. You still needed the money. Moran ignored him. Then the letters began. Sanskrit threats, tiger claws in blood. I recognized the hand Hawkins, my old sergeant, believed killed at Delhi. I thought him a ghost until I saw him in palace livery, serving the Duchess's tea. He wanted the stones and revenge. Hawkins stirred. You left me to the mutineers, Colonel. I crawled through the drains with a price on my head. Moran's eyes were steel. You deserted under fire. I wrote the report myself. Holmes interjected softly. Continue, Colonel. The staged disappearance. Moran nodded. I saw the net closing. Selby forged my hand, promising the emerald to Miss Winter if she married him. She refused, but agreed to help frighten me into surrendering it. Honor, she said, not greed. I decided to turn their trap. On the 12th, I cut my palm with a lancet, soaked the glove, left it in the orangery, scratched the doors with a garden rake fitted with steel claws, recorded the growl on a phonograph cylinder in the glass house. Then I hid in the magazine, leaving the map for Hawkins to find. I thought to catch them all in one sweep. Lestrade scribbled furiously. And the obituaries? My own invention. Paid a clerk at the Times £5 a name. Wanted Selby and Winter to believe the Maharaja's curse was real. It worked too well. Drove them to the pond. Selby lunged against his cuffs. You old fool, I'd have paid your debts and vanished to Argentina. Miss Winter's voice was ice. You would have melted the stone for gaming tables. I wanted it returned to the temple with my grandmother's name restored. Hawkins laughed, a dry rattle. and I wanted the pair of them to hang. We each played our parts. Holmes stepped forward, placing the velvet pouch on the table. The emeralds are here. The true stone and its mate. Colonel, your codicil? Moran produced the envelope. Leaves my estate to Miss Winter on condition the stones are returned to Jauncey with a plaque in memory of Princess Angeli, who gave her life for love. The Duchess witnessed it. Miss de Merville opened the envelope, reading aloud. To Violet de Merville, my ward, the sum of £5,000 and the Moran medals redeemed and restored. She looked up, eyes shining. You kept your promise, Guardian. Lestrade closed his notebook. Charges Selby. Conspiracy to murder, forgery, theft. Miss Winter, accessory, assault with a deadly weapon. Hawkins, attempted murder, impersonation. The Yard will sort the rest. Holmes raised a hand. One moment, the mechanical tiger. Whose design? Selby shrugged. Mine. Built it in the glass house with Hawkins' help. Stilts, wires, clockwork from a music box. The growl was Moran's own voice, recorded when he thought we were alone. Miss Winter added quietly, I painted the stripes. My grandmother taught me the temple patterns. Moran rose, steadying himself on the table. Then let the record show. I confessed to theft in '57, to staging my disappearance, to the false obituaries. But not to murder. The blood was mine alone. Lestrade nodded to the constables. Take them to the Yard. Colonel, you'll come voluntarily for a formal statement. As the prisoners were led away, Miss de Merville embraced Moran. You are free, sir. The curse is broken. He patted her cheek. Thanks to Holmes. And to you, child, for believing in an old sinner. Holmes pocketed the emeralds. The stones leave for Bombay on the next P&O. I have wired the Maharaja's heirs. The plaque will be bronze, the princess's name in Devanagari and English. Outside, the gardens were ablaze with mourning. The yew-beasts stood sentinel. The round pond mirrored a sky washed clean. We walked in silence to the palace gate, where a cab waited. Moran paused, looking back at the orangery. The tiger is silent now, he said, but its eyes will watch over Jauncey forever. Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. We returned to Baker Street as the sun climbed above the chimney pots, painting the fog-washed city in pale gold. The hansom's wheels sang over the cobbles, the horse's breath plumed white in the crisp air. Mrs. Hudson met us at number 221B with a cry of relief, her apron clutched in both hands. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, and the Colonel, alive, praise heaven. There's coffee, eggs, bacon, and a telegram from the Yard. Lestrade says the prisoners are in the cells and the Duchess is sending her carriage at 11. Holmes waved her quiet. Coffee first, Mrs. Hudson. Then the carriage. We have a stone to return and a story to close. We gathered in the sitting room, Moran in the basket chair, Miss de Merville beside him, Holmes pacing before the fire, I pouring coffee with a hand that still trembled from the night's exertions. The two emeralds lay upon the occasional table side by side on black velvet, the true stone, flawless save for the dagger flaw, its mate smaller but identical in cut. Between them rested the Duchess's diary, the Colonel's codicil, and the folded map from the magazine. Holmes filled his pipe, the Persian slipper tobacco fragrant as incense. Let us reconstruct the chain, Watson, while the facts are fresh. Begin with the list. I set down the coffee pot. The obituaries, Moran's invention, paid insertions to create the illusion of a curse. Moran nodded. I wanted Selby and Winter to believe the Maharaja's vengeance was real. It forced them to act. Holmes exhaled a thin stream of smoke, and act they did. Selby, drowning in debts, forged Moran's hand to promise the emerald to Miss Winter in exchange for marriage. She refused the marriage but agreed to the haunting. Honor, she said, not greed. Hawkins, the deserter, watched from the servants' corridors, planning his own theft. He paced to the window overlooking the street where a costermonger's barrow rattled past. The mechanical tiger was Selby's design, built in the glass house with Hawkins' help. Stilts, wires, clockwork from a music box. The growl. Moran's own voice recorded when he thought he was alone. The claw marks, garden rake fitted with steel blades. The blood, Moran's own, from a lancet. Mr. Merville's voice was soft, and the scarlet coat, the 11th Hussars, disbanded in 71. Selby revived the color to taunt Moran with his past, the brass buttons, royal livery stolen from the palace stores. The dolman jacket, altered by Miss Winter's hand, the thread silk, hand-stitched. Moran leaned forward. I staged the disappearance to draw them to the pond, left the glove, the claw marks, the note in crimson ink. Hid in the magazine with the map, expecting Hawkins to follow. But Selby and Winter were ahead. They chloroformed me, bound me in the armory, planned to drown me at moonrise. Holmes turned from the window. The paste emerald was Moran's misdirection. The true stone hidden in the tiger's skull, the mate in the magazine chest. When Selby and Winter triggered the automaton at the pond, Moran seized the moment. Disarmed Miss Winter, I disarmed Selby. Lestrade's constables closed the net. I poured a second cup. And Hawkins left the note in the armory to lure us to the magazine, planned to take both stones and vanish. But Moran's campaign chest held more than emeralds. Letters, the portrait, the princess's memory. Hawkins' revenge died with his capture. Holmes tapped the diary. The codicil leaves the estate to Miss Winter, the medals to Mr. Merville. The emeralds return to Jauncey with a plaque, in memory of Princess Angeli, who gave her life for love. Moran's eyes were distant. I took the stones in 57 to save my men from court-martial. Thought 40 years would bury the sin. But the tiger's eyes never closed. Mr. Merville touched his sleeve. You redeemed it, Guardian. The plaque will be bronze, the name in Devanagari and English. The princess will be at peace. The Duchess's carriage arrived at 11, a landau with the royal crest drawn by matched greys. We, Zulkul, rode to the palace in silence, the emeralds in a locked dispatch case on Holmes' lap. At the east gate, Lestrade waited with a sealed envelope, statements signed, charges filed. Selby to face trial for conspiracy and forgery, Miss Winter for accessory, Hawkins for attempted murder. The yard would seek transportation for all three. In the armory, the stuffed tiger had been returned to its pedestal, the empty socket filled with a glass eye. The mechanical beast lay in pieces on a workbench, wires and stilts catalogued as evidence. The Duchess embraced Moran, tears in her eyes. Sebastian, you are free. The Queen has granted a pardon for the mutiny theft. Restitution made. Moran bowed. Your Grace, I am an old soldier. My war is over. Holmes handed the dispatch case to a palace courier. For the P&O Malabar sailing at dusk, the Maharaja's heirs will receive it in Bombay. The plaque is commissioned, bronze, 2 feet square, to be set in the temple wall. We walked back through the gardens, the yew-beast standing sentinel, the round pond a mirror of the sky. MacDonald the gardener doffed his deerstalker. The tiger's silent now, sirs, and the flowers bloom sweeter for it. At Baker Street, Mrs. Hudson had laid a cold collation, ham, tongue, a Stilton like a cannonball. We ate in silence until Holmes raised his glass of claret. To forgiven sins and second chances, he said. Moran clinked his glass, and to the tiger's eyes that watched over us all. Mr. Merville smiled, and to Mr. Holmes, who saw through the fog. I raised my glass, and to Dr. Watson, who chronicled it for posterity. Holmes' eyes twinkled. The story is not yet complete. Watson, your notebook, the final deduction. I opened to a fresh page. Begin with the list? Holmes leaned back, pipe glowing. The list was the key. The obituaries, Moran's invention, but the deaths were real. Hargreave drowned, Blaine apoplexy, Folliot mauled. All served with Moran in 57, all knew of the emeralds. Hawkins, believed dead, survived, deserted, hid in the palace as a footman. Selby, drowning in debts, forged Moran's hand. Miss Winter, descendant of the princess, sought the stone's return. Moran staged the haunting to draw them out. The claw marks, rake and steel. The growl, phonograph. The blood, lancet. The scarlet coat, 11th Hussars, revived. The mechanical tiger, Selby's design, Winter's stripes. The emeralds, paste and true, hidden in the tiger's eyes. The magazine chest, Moran's campaign relics. The note, Hawkins's lure. The pond, Moran's trap. The net, Lestrade's constables. He paused, drawing on his pipe. Elementary, Watson. The tiger walked, but the man behind it stumbled. Moran laughed, the sound rich and free. And the moral? Holmes' smile was gentle. Even the noblest regiment can harbor a tiger in scarlet clothing. But justice, like fog, finds every corner. And honor, once lost, may be redeemed by a single act of restitution. Mr. Merville rose. Colonel Moran asks that you visit him in Dartmoor when the heather blooms. He has taken a cottage near the moor to write his memoirs. Holmes raised his cup. To Dartmoor, then, and to the tiger's eyes that will watch over Jauncey forever. We drank, the fire crackling, the Persian slipper tobacco curling like incense. Outside, London bustled on, unaware that a curse had been lifted, a stone returned, a sin forgiven.